Hello, today we're going to talk about visual displays in advertising. And in this presentation, we're going to first start off with defining our research. Then we're going to move on to the literature review, which are the articles that we read that pertain to this research. And then we're going to show you our hypothesis and research questions that framed our study. And then research methods, which were the things that we did to actually do the research, the results of those research methods, and limitations that came about from those, and finally, future research that could be done to move this research forward. For the purpose of our research, we defined it as any sort of visual aid that can be used to tempt a customer to purchase an item. For example, we've got window displays. They're used a lot for clothing stores, in-store poster cutouts and displays like those, pictures inside menus, and those fake plastic foods that you could almost pick up and eat.
Our literature review provided the foundation for our entire research study. We primarily drew from 3 different articles, the first being Michael Cavalier's research of 5 different supermarkets over 360 different items. Researching the impact of visual displays in each supermarket, Cavalier found that visual displays directly boosted sales depending on the product category. Low-cost, low-commitment items, described as items that are regularly purchased and that are not essential to shoppers' daily needs, ranked among the highest. Our research became more in-depth with a pair of articles that developed certain protocol for what makes a visual display successful. The first, by Sophia Bratu, focused on a target's ability to recall an advertisement as well as their capability to comprehend and react to it. The next, by Mark Rudy, centers on the steps necessary to create the ads themselves. Bratu's article states that visual displays can enhance ad recall and produce more positive consumer attitudes. Rudy's article lists 5 elements of effective visual merchandising. These 5 elements are defined as communication, meaning great signage should attract, tell a story, and even convey a bit of humor. In all cases, it should be clear and accurately describe the product. Landscaping. This applies to display and how it relates to the environment immediately around it. While symmetry is comforting to the eye, asymmetrical merchandising can cause the shopper to seek out details. Texture. Boxes, metal, wood, burlap, and other materials create contrast and anchor the product in the case, as long as the various materials don't clash or overwhelm the display. Color. The food itself should always be the primary color. Bowls and other merchandising vessels should complement the color of the food being displayed. Decor. Not to be confused itself with visual merchandising, decorative elements like flowers are most effective in a sporting role, while reflecting the larger shopping environment. First, through our research, we wanted to show that Cavalier was correct in his findings. Then we needed to distinguish between product categories, as his research pointed out. Through these literary reviews, we were able to construct an effective survey and also in-depth interview in order to measure the results of visual displays in advertising.
From our background research, we came up with the following hypothesis: that visual displays for food and beverage companies will create awareness about the visually displayed product and generate sales at the point of purchase, which will lead to a sustainable increase in sales. We also came up with the accompanying research questions to help guide our primary research. They are as follows: how do visual displays affect purchasing decisions? Do purchases made while viewing visual displays translate into a long-term increase in sales for that item? Does the time of day affect consumers' susceptibility to visual displays? And finally, do age, gender, and sex play a role in whether or not visual displays affect the consumer's purchase decisions?
Our research methods were done in 3 parts. First, our observations. These were individual observations taken at 4 locations around the Austin, Texas area. First, Starbucks, then Torchy's Tacos, Whole Foods, and finally Noodles and Company. Each observation took about an hour and were not planned on by either the employees nor the patrons that were using these locations. We noticed that men and women behaved similarly, but we needed to try and measure their thought process behind a purchase involving a visual display. The observations primarily aided our in-depth interview questions, which leads us to our next case. Our in-depth interview questions were also done on a one-on-one basis. These ranged from about 45 minutes to an hour, and were in an interview setting with similar questions to our survey. Our survey sample consisted of 166 respondents. These were obtained through using various means of social media, primarily Facebook and Twitter, and the respondents' ages and demographics are recorded in our paper.
Now we're going to talk about our results, what we found and how it can pertain to visual display advertising moving forward. Our t-test analyzing gender and purchase intent showed that women are more likely to purchase a product based on the existence of a visual display than men are. We also discovered that consumer awareness is positively related to perceived effectiveness, meaning that the amount of awareness that is created for a consumer is dependent on how effective they perceive a visual display to be. And if a consumer views a display they feel is effective or that has a positive impact on them, they are more likely to retain that information about the product and be aware of that product in the future. We had several themes arise from our in-depth interviews, and then from these themes we developed 3 dominant sets of ideas that can be applied to visual displays. The first set of ideas deals with the way visual displays are implemented, and our interviewees helped identify several techniques that made visual displays appealing to them. The first of these is repetition. They had to be repeated enough to be effective, but not so much that it becomes redundant to the point that the consumer loses interest in the product or service. It has to also be simple. Clear visuals and a straightforward message help communicate most effectively. It also helps when a display is interactive. Interactions with displays not only attract attention, but also facilitate a connection between the brand or the product and the consumer. And lastly, cohesion is important. When looking at visual displays, they should be stylistically similar to the rest of the visuals that are being presented by a brand or product at that time. This helps the consumer identify the product on site and then instantly relate it back to the visual display. When deciding whether or not to use visual displays, it's really important to consider the type of product you're going to advertise. Our research shows that consumers are more apt to purchase products based on a visual display if it's a more low involvement product. Most people cited that although they may order a new menu item based on a display at a restaurant or a coffee shop, they don't really feel comfortable making larger purchases such as vehicles or homes based solely on the same kind of visual. And finally, it's also important to consider what purpose a visual display will serve in a product's campaign. We learned that while visual displays can be a helpful and informative way to educate consumers about a product, we also discovered that they are better suited as supplemental advertising. A visual display is most successful as a reminder of a product a consumer has already seen at a location outside of the store. It's a gentle nudge to the shopper to make the purchase of a product he or she may have already considered purchasing.
While we garnered some interesting results from our research, there are some areas for improvement and some limitations that we came across. These were primarily in the 3 key data collection methods that we utilized: observational, depth interviews, and a survey. For the observational exercise, we could have done more observations to get a more comprehensive scope for the buyer behavior with regards to visual displays. For the depth interviews, we could have conducted more thorough interviews, and this is primarily a result of the interviewees not being professional interviewers and asking as effective questions as possible. The survey also had a couple limitations in that the majority of the respondents were college-aged and an overwhelming majority were college-educated, which is not necessarily an accurate representation of the whole of society. Furthermore, the 50-year and older age classification was perhaps too broad, since that represents a very broad section of age ranges. The final thing for the survey is that we should have included a technology selection in what products you're likely to buy from based on visual displays, as that was a very common write-in for the respondents. There are numerous opportunities for future research based on consumers and visual displays. The first of which is that this research can be expanded upon to incorporate a larger and more diverse sample size, thus giving you a greater idea of what specific trends might be with regard to consumers and visual displays. Another key area of potential future research is the technological innovations that accompany digital visual displays. Increasingly, businesses are using visual displays to promote their products, and increasingly these are in a digital format, which allow for interactivity with the customer and on-demand changes. User experience is a component of this realm that incorporates the digital display technology and interactivity with the user, and this is a prime area for future research. In utilizing these new technologies, digital display technologies, along with user experience components, they can provide a more holistic experience for the consumer, which in turn could potentially increase sales and buyer perception of the product. This is important for marketers to be aware of, and moving forward they should know how to properly utilize visual displays, especially in the digital realm. And that concludes our presentation on visual displays. We hope it was informative. Thank you!